Good evening and welcome to Catholic Family Podcast. I'm Dan Davis and I'm here tonight with Father Geckle and with Eric and kind of the old crew. And we're going to talk tonight about a subject that really kind of gets our blood boiling. And I think that we were just saying beforehand that it's just one of those things that I think is one that we have hard time with, and one that we see a lot of answers, a lot of issues, and it should make for a great discussion tonight. So we're going to talk about basically we called the episode "Behold the Christians: How They Love Each Other," and the reality that there's just a lot of circular firing squad there. There's a lot of condescension, a lot, especially online. And let's identify it, let's look at it, and let's talk through how can we be better. Is it really a problem? How can we be better? So I said beforehand we wanted to kind of start with quick introductions and maybe about 30 seconds or a minute on something totally unrelated to the topic. Okay, so I'll start here, and I just want to make a guarantee. I want to make a promise to the audience here tonight that the referees have not rigged the outcome of this discussion tonight. So if anybody's following that, it's like we're finding that the whole world's rigged. Everything's rigged, all right? And the NBA, we're going to find that the NFL's rigged, and I think Broncos fan, we already know that. But yeah, that's kind of my start. Father, you want to go next here?
I don't know. As I mentioned when we in the pregame here, this is something that's been keeping me up the last couple nights, and it's just been driving me crazy because, yeah, it's been on my mind a lot. So I'm a little bit on edge over it, honestly, just because I think it's causing a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good day, October 24th, Feast of Saint Raphael. It's It felt like for any Lord of the Rings fans, I needed to start with this is the Catholic Family Podcast, and it's 7:00 in the evening on October.
That's
24th.
right. Yeah, yeah. Lisa put that on. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here, and you're lucky to be here. Okay, anybody that doesn't like Lord of the Rings thinks I'm a nut.
It doesn't know what you're talking about.
You like
there,
Lord of the Rings? You appreciate that.
Anyone who doesn't like Lord of the Rings is a nut. So
yeah, there we go. Right. Well, let's be charitable.
Yeah.
They're in invincible ignorance. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now.
No, thanks for the invite. Glad to be part of the gang here. And what better way to have a spend a Friday afternoon with a little cigar, smoking with some friends, and talking about sedevacantism. Sounds good to me.
This and that. Yeah, and I got to say real quick, guys, I grew up with asthma. The asthma that's just like could have died type asthma, and ever since it's like cigars, I just have never had a taste for it. So you guys carry on.
I'm the classy one with the pipe.
With the pipe,
caveman with the cigar.
So I'm the lazy one that I don't want to keep up the pipe. So
right. So we are not Nazis here about that, but yeah, no, I'll go ahead and start real quick with just kind of a quick overview of what we're talking about here. Is that especially when you get online, I know for me, I mean, I'll go back to when I very first started on Twitter, and I think it was probably 10 years ago or something like that. It was quite a while ago, and maybe more than that. And I got on because I was going through and started to see some of the religious conversation out there, some of the traditional, some of the sedevacantist type conversation, and I just did not like the tone of things. If you think of how we look at we look at Fenites today, and people were they were rude, and I remember a couple of different people who were on, and they were spouting the sedevacantist position, and people would come up and ask them questions, and they would literally say, "You're not worth my time. I'm not going to take the time to answer that." And it was just like we made such a bad impression. And in a minute here, I'm going to kind of get into a history of why and where this mindset came from, and how I think we have slowly started evolving out of it. I think we've gotten a lot better, but there still is very much, I think, this spirit, especially online, of just presenting a very bad face for who we are as a movement. So, Eric, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, so I'm not as plugged in to the Twitter and online world as you are, right? My nickname's the Caveman for a reason. So I would say if I have a special voice on the group of the three of us, it's probably the most white-pilled, so to speak, right? All of my experience with the traditionals have been, good, but in person good. So outside of a few YouTube comments, did you want me to share just sort of where I've been the last couple months, or?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been traveling a lot with the family lately, across the country, not across the world. We're not rich or anything, but a few months ago we traveled to see some extended family across country in a different state that's far away from Colorado, and we went to a mass under a satellite parish.
A better state?
No, there is no better state. I can confirm that with
You
certitude.
just bypassed
sorry.
Ohio, didn't you?
It wasn't Ohio. If it was, I would tell you.
But they didn't let him in.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But no, we attended a mass at a satellite parish that was under Bishop Sanborn, and it was a beautiful church, beautiful mass, wonderful sermon. And then afterwards, we met and chatted with a whole bunch of of the parishioners. Everyone was wonderful, and they were awesome people, kind, interesting, really just the salt of the earth. And they knew that we went to a CMRI parish. And then we obviously knew they were, under Bishop Sanborn. But, what we felt was, it wasn't that we were CMRI and Bishop Sanborn. We just felt that we were all Catholic.
Right.
You could almost feel that, we're members of the same mystical body. And what didn't come up? The thesis didn't come up.
Yeah, it probably doesn't.
The 1955 Holy Week didn't come up, right? None
Yeah.
of that came up. We talked about our backgrounds, our family history, how we came to the true faith. We talked about homeschooling our children. It was awesome. And, I've been to probably 20 to 25 parishes, sedevacantist, I like to say Catholic parishes throughout the country. Half of those CMRI, some Bishop Sanborn, some under Bishop Dolan, Bishop McGuire, some independents. And my experience there has always been the same. It's always charitable, kind, welcoming people. And I guess my question, and I don't know if we'll solve it today, but why is it so different online?
Yeah.
Am I just lucky that I've only met good people in all the travels?
I don't think it's luck, because I think we've mostly all had the same experience.
I think it's the general rule. If you actually go there, that's what it is. I mean, I've people visit from different places. We just a few months ago, we had a guy from France come. He goes to the IMBC, and it was fantastic. He was a great guy, very friendly with everybody. It was great. It's like, I'm sure we would have the exact same thing going over there. But the problem is that online, and what I get so irritated about, it's the written word, not the in-person interactions with people. The written or texted, typed word, whatever, of some angry loudmouths that don't have the patience to deal with the interactions online, and they can reach thousands of people, and it makes an impression, and it affects thousands of people, and it might get shared around, and more and more and more, and that's what people on the outside looking in see. And it's like, I remember there's a gentleman, a parishioner of mine elsewhere, that he had a brother that was dying, that was, I don't know if he was Catholic or left the Catholic Church, or he was Novus Ordo, whatever. And he was interested when his brother started coming to a traditional mass and everything. And then he looked online and saw all the infighting and all the attacks and all that other stuff. He's like, I'm not going to be a part of this. This is ridiculous. Right. And he died in that state. He didn't come around. He didn't go back to church or anything like that. It's like, there are really bad consequences with this stuff. And I'm so fed up with it. If you can't tell, I'm really fed up with it.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to take a look, and I'm going to start out with a video here.
I'm sorry. The angry Sede, talking about angry Sedes.
Angry Sede.
How dare Sedes.
In fact, that was exactly, I was talking to Lisa, kind of queuing up this whole thing with her, and she said, don't be angry. And it's like, we definitely don't want to be angry about the whole thing.
The definition of hypocrisy.
Hypocrites.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I think that we're going to, go ahead, Father.
No, it's like if it's in the family, it's like if it's your brother, you can knock him around a little bit. But if it's outside the family, it's like you could be on your best behavior, right?
Yeah. but I think that what we're hoping to do tonight is to kind of do maybe a little bit of self introspection and see. And what I want to do, I'm going to give a little bit of a history lesson here in terms of, I think, where we came from, where we are, and I think why some of this exists. And I want to start with Anthony Abate. He's from Avoiding Babylon. I think everybody knows he was on Kevin's show a month or two ago with Mario Dirksen. They really had a really nice conversation, very cordial. Everything was good. And now I think I'm a little bit concerned that we've kind of opened a Pandora's box with him. And now what's happening is Sadies are attacking him on his own show and pestering him about, why are you not a scientific contest? Hey, Kevin and Mario showed you the truth. Why are you not a scientific contest now? And I don't. Let me see if I'm going to play a short clip, just a few seconds of a video from him the other night, and see if it's our internet might be not up to the task. We're going to try it real quick. At least nothing. You're not going to see it real well, but I think at least you should hear what Anthony has to say.
Cared about the spiritual well-being of anybody in that whole period when they shut everything down. No, it's not. Look, it has nothing to do with answering your questions. You're all just annoying. Like, it's not like you're just annoying. I don't think you guys get it. You'll never get traction because you're annoying. I try to have conversation. I had a perfectly normal conversation with Kevin and Mario. Totally fine. They seem normal. Then I read the comments and I'm just like, holy crap. I would ban every one of you from my chat.
Okay, so let me get myself back up here and that down. So yeah, that's kind of what I think we're looking at here, and I think it's unfortunate, and I want to say first of all to Anthony personally that my impression here is that you're right, that there is a lot, and this is what we've just been talking about. What we're going to get into here is that there is a lot of this that's extremely annoying, but Anthony, I'm going to address this to you. I know we've got a lot of crossover audience members, and I'm hoping this actually gets put in front of you and that you can see it, because I want to try to give some historical perspective on how we got here and where we are today. And I'm not going to try to convince you the position or anything like that, but just kind of like Kevin did, hopefully give you a little bit of background to understand. Here's why we are some of us are the way we are, and here's where we're working on it, where we really are working on it. But anyways, by way of introduction, real quick, I am the guy who created the thumbnail for the episode that you did with, and I got a quick story I got to tell on this. I went out looking for a picture of Mario and of you, Anthony, as well, on Google, and there's not much there. And so I looked around, and the best thing I could come up with here was basically this one, right? And I think I removed the background and all. It's got you in a t-shirt. And so I've got this photo of Mario, and he's like at a conference in a three-piece suit, giving a speech, and I didn't like the look. I felt like, okay, if I put Anthony out there in a white t-shirt and Mario in a suit, that it's going to be sending a message that, hey, this guy's kind of unsophisticated, and our guy Mario's formal. So I went to AI and asked it, okay, well, let's see if we can put a shirt and tie on it had ChatGPT go out and see if we can put a shirt and tie on him. Okay, so here's the next image, and put a shirt and tie on. And so we sent that off to Anthony, to you, Anthony, and the next day, and of course you saw it, and was like, well, I don't know if anybody's going to even recognize me, because I'm not a guy who wears ties. And then I think it got out on this picture, got out on Twitter, and literally I saw it and it's like, no, don't let this out, publicly. And but it was I think you said, okay, let's not do the shirt and tie. So we tried a second again, and I thought, okay, well, if we can't do a shirt and tie, let's put him in at least a sharp black t-shirt. So we did the sharp black t-shirt, and that was the one that's the one that ended up in the thumbnail. So that was kind of my first introduction there to you, Anthony. But anyways, I want to okay. So by way of history, go back all the way to, obviously that we trace the vacancy in the see back to 1958, and really though, even 1965, which was the end of the Vatican II Council, which is where all the heresies came from, and all of that, there was no resistance, there was no sedevacantist movement, there was nothing like that that came after, immediately in the aftermath of the council. And by the way, Eric and Father, if you want to break in at any time, feel free. And I think there's some reasons for that. The documents themselves didn't come out until later. They were vague, they were tedious, they were hard to get through. They were very craftily worded so that there was a Catholic and a modernist meaning to almost all the different heresies. I think to a certain extent, the clergy after Vatican II had a certain instinct that the Vatican that the it had been a train wreck, but for the most part, I think they just kind of went about their business, assumed that God would take care of things, that the Pope would take care of things, and that the gates of hell would not prevail, and all would be good. Okay, now we get to 1969 and the new mass, and this had a tangible impact on believers, on Catholics, on priests, on bishops, on everybody. And now you started to see, I mean, obviously priests, they literally turned their back on Christ, and I think they felt the actual effects of modernism, and you started to see at that point a more of a resistance, not necessarily to Vatican II, but to the new mass. And so there were a lot of different priests and bishops who just refused to offer the new mass. And but what I think the Vatican did, they don't think they called themselves sedevacantists. They didn't say the chair was empty. They just said, I'm not going to offer the new mass. And what happened, I think, is the Vatican just kind of waited these priests out. Maybe they went to them and gave them the opportunity to retire. Maybe they sent them on a mission where there were no people. But for the most part, they kind of allowed them to say the old mass as far as everything I've known, but they tried to make them as unpublic as they could. Okay, and so, but at that point, there still was not much of a sedevacantist movement. Now, by the mid 70s, that's when I think things really started to move forward with these original priests who did not, who just refused to do mass. They had a couple of problems. Number one is they had no community. If they were priests, they probably didn't have bishops. They didn't have groups that they could align with. They did not have newsletters. I mean, they were kind of all out on their own. And in addition, they did not have a progression plan. And so without a progression plan, basically they just kind of eventually by the 2000s or so, they kind of died off. There was no community. But in the mid 70s and then into the 80s, there were basically three different communities that built up. One was in Fillmore, New York, Most Holy Trinity Seminary. One in Oyster Bay, New York, which was I'll get talking in depth about that. And then in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which eventually became Spokane, which became the CMRI. Now I'm going to talk about those three groups real quick. Fillmore, New York, the Most Holy Trinity Seminary, that's the Diamond Brothers. They, if you are really seeing obnoxious Sades, okay, they're probably what we call Feeneites, and a lot of them are Feeneites, and you can recognize them. They're actually heretics, and because they don't believe church teaching as regards baptism. But basically, you can recognize them in a number of different ways. That they'll usually identify themselves with VaticanCatholic.com. They will talk about frequently. They'll use the acronym EENS, which is Extra Ecclesiam Nulla Salus. Outside the church, there is no salvation. They get that teaching completely wrong, but they try to force their views on. They'll even come in the comments of this show and say, that we don't get EENS right. And then you'll see them talk about what they call Bod Bob, and it's not Bob from Chicago and his body. It's baptism of desire and baptism of blood, because those are two concepts that they don't believe in, and basically to the point where they will call St. Thomas Aquinas a heretic. I mean, it's just it's amazing the depth. I looked into into this position in quite a bit of depth, and it's just bad theology. It's kind of stupid. But if you see them, I know for me, I just block them. When I see them, I block them. There's for the most part, you just can't talk any sense into them. They're not there for a reasonable schedule. They're there for intellectual conquest, and they'll dog you until you give it to them.
Yeah, I
Well,
want just to add a little bit there while you're on the
Mhm.
Feeneites, right? Oh,
Yeah.
Father, you probably are going to say similar things. I even hesitate to call them sedes, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
happen to hold the sede position, but that doesn't make them Catholic, right? They're like you said, they're not Catholic. So that was just
Right.
my
Well,
addition to your rant.
well, and I have a different, very different thing to say. You know, the way that the bishops in the United States before Vatican II, the way they handled people that followed Father Feeney was, if they were pushing it on people and spreading it around, they were refused communion. But if they held
Wow.
it, they were confused, they were whatever, they did not refuse them communion. They just made them aware. You can't be publishing this. You can't be talking about this. If they're misled and confused about it, and maybe they didn't understand the distinctions and stuff, they would give them communion as long as they weren't pushing it. So I don't think it's right to say they're not Catholics or whatever. Some of them, they found their way out of the Novus Ordo, and the Diamond Brothers were the first thing that made sense and actually showed
Right.
Catholic teaching. I think it's a lot like a lot of the people in the R&R. I don't call them heretics. I think the same thing with a lot of the Feeneites. They're trying to be Catholic, but the people, the ringleaders and the ones that are just constantly pushing it, I don't discuss with them. Yeah, I don't.
Right.
But there's different distinctions to be made.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. So yeah, no, and that's absolutely true. And so on to the other groups. Okay, so now you had basically of the two that we wanted to discuss. There's one in the West and one in the East. The first one to come about was in the West. That was the Coeur d'Alene group. And what that was basically two priests, Father Dennis Chicoine and Father Francis Schuchart, who had been with the Blue Army. Now, the Blue Army was a initiative of Holy Mother Church that was meant to spread the message of Fatima, and was meant to be basically a counter to Russia's Red Army. This is how we were fighting communism, because it made perfect sense. Our Lady told the children of Fatima that Russia will spread her errors throughout the world. They developed a Red Army, so we developed a Blue Army for our Blessed Mother. The two, though, Father Schuchart and Father Chicoine, they went rogue from a Novus Ordo standpoint. They saw the errors in the church. Father Dennis had been a Marine, and they broke off from Holy Mother Church and became probably what I would call the first sedevacantist community. And that was a very small community, obviously, but what they did is they would travel throughout the country, and they would give speeches and hand out literature and things like that. And very frequently, people would see the message and say, yeah, I've got to be a part of this. I've got to get out of the Novus Ordo. I've got to get up here to a better place, to raise my children or whatever it is, to a real Catholic conclave. And they started to congregate up in Idaho. And then Idaho, 1978, they bought the beautiful Mount St. Michael's building. I've got a picture of this for anybody who has never seen it. It's a gorgeous facility. It had been a Jesuit, built in the early 20th century, a Jesuit center of learning, and where they had their seminary. And so, but they bought that and moved the operation there. Now that's basically by 1978. Now I'm going to switch over to the East, and that's Oyster Bay, New York. That was a group of priests who broke off from Bishop Lefebvre in Econ, Switzerland, and I forget, it was 1981. It was late 70s, early 80s. And they broke off for a number of reasons, basically about the way the SSPX was being run at that point. They had big concerns about whether converts into the SSPX were being properly reordained, about how marriage annulments were being handled, things like that. And so they set up shop in Oyster Bay, New York, and elected Bishop Clarence Kelly as their bishop, and had him consecrated. And they, I think, and this is just a layman talking, and just giving my opinion here, but I think that they made a very fateful decision and early on, and decided that they were going to relook at some of the reforms of Pope Pius XII in 1955 Holy Week. They were going to look at the calendar, St. Joseph the Worker, things like that. And I think, if I had the chance to go back and say something known with hindsight, I would say, guys, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, because you're going to end up having issues with authority. So that group started out in Oyster Bay, and eventually started to kind of break up. But now I'm going to switch back over to the mid 1980s, and this gets back to the CMRI and Mount St. Michael. And basically in 1981, about 81, 82, 83 or so, Bishop Schuchart, by this point he'd been made a bishop. Bishop Schuchart had a surgery, and I think it was on his back, I believe it was. But after the surgery, he became addicted to painkillers. And if you think about it, I mean, think about it for just a minute from our perspective. Here he was, one of the most powerful clerics in the world. He was one of the very few that was actually holding the faith. He had this beautiful building. He had a large congregation. Things were really going well. He was hooked on pain medication, and the devil just kind of took over and ran amok. And I'm not going to go into any details of what happened there, but by 1984, it was June 3rd, 1984, which ironically I think may have been the day I graduated from high school. But June 3rd, 1984, they actually kind of had a final run-in and basically ran Bishop Schuchart off of the property at Mount St. Michael's. He took a small group of clerics and laymen along with him and some stuff, and basically disappeared after that. And so you had, by 1984, by 1984, you had the CMRI as it was, and was kind of just in a state of shock, really, I think. Okay, so now back to the east again with Oyster Bay, New York. What happened there is you did end up having some issues with matters of authority. They disagreed on a number of different things. It took consecrations, which we're not going to get into here, and there were some disagreements. And basically, that group kind of splintered into several different pieces. Okay, there was one group of three who stayed with the Society of St. Pius V, as that they had called themselves, SSPV. There were three that stayed. So it was Bishop Kelly, it was Father Jenkins, and Father Skirka from Montana. Father Jenkins is from Florida. And so it was also, that was the home of one of probably the top rated of all sedevacantist podcasts or of any kind of video ever. That was what Catholics Believe. And that was the home of that as well. You had a second group that moved to Cincinnati, Michigan. I think that was at that point Father Dolan, Father Chicada, and Father Sanborn, and Father Sanborn and Father Dolan would both become bishops later. And I think that they were kind of they kind of held together to a certain degree, although they had some doctrinal differences, but they did held together. And then the last three just kind of went their own way. That was Father Eugene Berry, Father Joseph Collins, may he rest in peace, and Father Zapp, who's in California. And so that group kind of then fell apart, and kind of went their own way. Okay, so now back to Spokane again. In Spokane, basically from 1984 through 1991, the congregation there had no bishop, and they tried a couple of different things. They tried putting themselves under a Bishop George Musey, and they tried Bishop Robert McKenna, who the famous exorcist. I think for one of the famous exorcism movies, I don't remember, Amityville Horror, one of those was based on exorcism that he did, Bishop McKenna. But they kind of struggled along. Finally, in 1991, Bishop Moises Carmona, from Mexico. He had been an early pioneer in Mexico, which is one of they basically had the Cristeros tradition down there, and I think the Cristeros tradition kind of helped to grow into Sedevacantism. I don't know that Bishop Carmona had been a Cristeros himself, but he came to the CMRI and told them, "Hey, you probably need to choose a priest, and I'll consecrate him as pope or as bishop." And so they did that. It was Father Tarcisius, who is Bishop Mark Peverunas, and who is the bishop to today. 1991 was when this happened. And so, and it would be, Anthony, if you're watching this, I hope you are. You'll probably be interested to know that Bishop Carmona is actually an incorruptible. And there's not a lot of documentation on it. It's never been actually scientifically studied or anything. But it's actually Bishop Peverunas who talked about that in one of his newsletters. He was not like Saint Bernadette and purely pristine, but basically they exhumed his body after a number of years, and there was just he was not advanced decayed. But anyways, okay, so Bishop Peverunas now, 1991, had a particular challenge, because what had happened in Spokane with the CMRI is, like I said, Father Dennis was a former Marine. They were very rigid, and even some of the priests who I've talked to is that they were probably too rigid. There's a story, you saw that picture of the mount. There's stories of punishments where they forced the young men who had talked back to one of the priests, and literally had to go outside and crawl around the entire mount in the snow on their knees. And so, I mean, things were really, really rigid. They were really tough. And so
the way
it had kind of
I'm
become
sorry, just
cultish.
a way I think either Bishop or one of the older priests said is a lot of the superiors of the CMRI were like former like World War II vets or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
or Korea War, like they were all from the military, and they treated it like a boot camp, and there were problems. They went way overboard. They
Way
kind of
overboard, yeah.
responded way too far, too much, and they say that. I mean, and a lot of our priests today, they had to put up with that themselves. They were the
Right.
ones that were getting treated that way
And
too.
victimized by it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it created for Bishop Peverunas then a particular challenge, where what he needed to do was come in and try to moderate things and swing back towards the middle. So you think about the two extremes. You had the Novus Ordo, which was all laxity, all a lot of indifference, sloppy, and just basically poorly done, very not rigorous, religion that the Novus Ordo is.
Right after the 70s, right after the 70s, when
yeah.
it wasn't cool to be trad. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other hand, you had things go too rigid in Spokane, and Bishop Peverunas then had to kind of move things towards the middle. And one of the things he did early on was actually move himself to Omaha, Nebraska. That's why he's in Omaha today, and he allowed more autonomy for the sisters that were up there, for the clergy that was still up there. And yet what the bishop really tried to do was to create a congregation where there was still rigor, and everything was still done according to the way it needed to be done. However, our attitude was really more one of humility, and he stressed charity, and he stresses simplicity. I can tell you that there have been a couple times where I've proposed frou-frou type, the stuff that would probably be great in the Lefebvre tradition, and the Bishop Peverunas just is not interested, because he likes simplicity. He's all about saving souls. And I think he really put this Mount St. Michael's group, the CMRI, onto a different path. Okay, so now back to the Oyster Bay group, and what I want to do is just kind of now bring things to the current, to the present. So today, basically, you have the CMRI has grown like wildfire. And so I think now we have five bishops. Okay, Bishop Heverinus, Bishop Davila in Mexico, two Bishop Espinas in Argentina, because there's a lot of ground for them to cover. They needed two. And then now we have an affiliation. I don't think it's an actual obedience or anything, but there's an affiliation with the Bishop Waugh in Canada. And then there's 60, I believe 60 actually affiliated priests, some secular, some religious, probably I think another 15 or 20 that have lesser degrees of affiliation. They may get their oils from Bishop or whatever it is. And then I think he said that there were 220, I believe, total religious, all over when you count the sisters, the nuns, and everything else. So the CMRI today, it accounts for about 60% of the entire landscape of Sedevacantism. And so the other 40%, I would say, is probably kind of split between some of these other groups. The IMBC is another really good group of priests in Europe. They're a pretty large group, but then you've got the smaller groups. You've got RCI Bishop Sanborn. You've got the SSPV still. You've got St. Gertrude's. We talked about that a little bit. St. Gertrude's in the late 90s, early 2000s, I forget the exact date, kind of went through a similar scenario as what they went through in the mountain. Not nearly as serious, but they kind of had some dark days. And what we found is that these dark days for the Mount, Bishop Heverinus and the CMRI really humbled us as a congregation. And St. Gertrude's, I think, kind of went through the same thing. It humbled them. And so for the most part now, that's, I think, kind of where we are today. The other groups, the group that came from the Nine are kind of, with the exception of St. Gertrude the Great, they're wouldn't say they're dying on the vine. I mean, there's a lot of money there. There's a big social media presence and things like that, but not a lot of folks there. And I think what's really crazy, and this I think is what's kind of blow people away. Of the 9 priests, there are 5 still living. 4 have passed away. Of those 5, only one of the 5, that's Father Zapp in California, would sanction their people to go to a CMRI mass. And on the other side, we'll say the other thing. When it's the other way around, hey, if you're CMRI, is it okay to go to Bishop Sanborn's mass or to the SSPV masses? Or, well, yeah. I mean, valid priest, valid mass, you're okay to go. So I think that there's some lack of unity there, but I think that you're seeing that basically there's 2 mindsets, kind of 2 camps. And what I can say, and I'm gonna do this without bad mouthing, but I just want to say that the CMRI, we have focused so hard on being humble. And we kind of get out there publicly, but we try not to make a nuisance of ourselves, and we try not to be annoying. Okay. And so it was really that CMRI spirit, I think, that you were seeing, Anthony, if you're still with me here, you're seeing with Kevin and with Mario, and that's, I think, what you were seeing there. And some of the other people that if they're not Feniites, they're going to be from some of these other groups that I think are still they have not had their dark days. They kind of live for some of this warfare. I feel like for a couple of the apologists out there, they're still kind of stuck in the year 1990, and they're still stuck in like the graphic behind me. We're arranged as a circular firing squad, and we're kind of firing on each other. We're firing at modernism. We're firing on each other. So what I want to say, and Anthony, I hope you're still with me here. If the abuse from the Sedevacantists has become worse since you came on with Kevin and with Mario, which it wouldn't surprise me if it has, I humbly apologize that that's happened. I think we may have just opened up a Pandora's box for you, and there's going to be some of this annoyance, but understand it's not coming from us. Um, but I think what I want to say is that as we roll forward here, we are still theologically aligned with these other groups. But we've got the set of a contest position. We hold it with theological certainty, all that kind of stuff. We're theologically aligned, but I feel like we're more temperamentally aligned with more of this alliance of avoiding Babylon with Stephen Cox, who we've had on, with Chris Jackson, who not a friend of the show. He hasn't been on the show, but kind of a friend of me. I would call him on Twitter, and we've had good conversations in the past. But that's where, and I'm not trying to let Father and Eric kind of speak your own piece here. I'm just talking for myself, and I think I pretty well talk for Kevin as well. But that's, I think, kind of where we're coming from. Now, I want to make one last comment for you, Anthony. I'm going to issue you a little bit of a challenge here, okay? And I think that you'll understand if you go through with this. You'll understand. And I know you're probably busy. If you don't have the time for it, maybe find somebody who does, a student or a retiree or whatever. But what I would say, go out to Twitter, create a brand new account, sock puppet account. Just give it any name. Just give a random name or whatever. Go out to your community. Go out to Taylor Marshall's community. Go out to any trad community, SSPX, go to Novus Ordo community, go to any one of these communities out there, and just put a post in the comments and say, hi, I'm a Sede, I come in peace, and I love you all. Okay, something along those lines. And I think what you're going to find is not annoying. You're going to find hatred. You're going to find hatred for this position. And I think that there's some of that just gets spun up in people. I mean, we're all human, we're all fallible. And I think that we suffer a certain amount of that. And eventually we just kind of snap and we push back and we get annoying and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the state of things. And Father Eric, I've been totally dominating this discussion, as I warned that I might. But if you guys want to maybe pop in here and say, okay, here's where we are. How do we go forward from here? That's what I'm always interested. I'm not so much interested in where we've been, but how do we go forward?
Well, I want to say first of all that this is the most confusing time to be a Catholic in the church's history. From the time of the apostles till now, there's never been a time that's been more confusing. And you have so many people in the world that want to be Catholic and are just so confused, and they don't understand, they don't get it. And so, we want to it's by the grace of God that anybody has any clarity on this issue. This is so confusing to so many people. But to kind of echo your last comment there about seeing, go online as a Sede and see what you get back. How many times, I was listening to that video when I was driving on the rundown or whatever it was called. It just came across it. And he's like, we get called this and we get called that and we get called semi-trads and other things. Don't like it. Like, we are called Protestants all the time.
Heretics.
Every time you mention that, Sede or this, whatever, Protestants, you're just Martin Luther. You're Martin Luther. You're a schismatic. You're this. You're that. Like, it's not just coming from one side. And I say that there's, you get, I think, a lot of the frustration from Sedes that are really trying to help convert people. Like you mentioned, like, people are, blowing up and they cut ties with their family and stuff. Well, sometimes they do that because it just gets too vicious and they're like, well, we both went too far. But it's when you come as a sedevacantist, I've had this happen to me. I'm sure Dan and Eric have had this happen too. You come to somebody that is, really trying to live as Catholics, and they are doing the best they know to be Catholics. And you say, hey, did you know that Pope Pius XII said this? Did you know that Pope Pius IX condemned that? And they say, stop being a Protestant. Don't worry about it. It's not important. And I'm just following the Pope, or I'm just following this, and it doesn't really matter. It's like, no, but this is a condemned heresy, and these people are doing it. These people are doing it, and you're okay with that? We can't do this. And then it gets heated because a lot of these people, especially when they are new to sedevacantism, their eyes are open to like, oh my gosh, the church has been infiltrated, and I've been strung along for sometimes decades. And when I come to this realization, I want to point out the heresies. I want to point out all these errors that are leading all these people astray. And the response we get back is, you're schismatic. Stop being a Protestant. You're just like Martin Luther. I just got called that the other day. You're Martin Luther or something like that. That's, being called a semi-trad, maybe that's not a very nice title, but getting called Martin Luther all the time, getting called Protestants all the time, while you're complaining about being called whatever, it's not just coming from one side. It's coming from a lot of different sides. And I'm really frustrated with a lot of the misunderstandings and other things, and there's a lot of misrepresentations. Sedevacantists misrepresent people in the R&R, and Novus Ordo people that are trying. R&R people misrepresent Sedevacantists all the time. Novus Ordo people represent both camps. That's the circular firing squad. So I thought that was a perfect picture for this, because all these people, it's so confusing. So many people are trying to figure out what in the world is going on, and they're just shooting at each other, when the problem is modernism. The problem is all these heresies that have come out of the Vatican and are leading all these people astray and confusing them. And I want to talk to these people. I've commented on their last stream. I want to come on and talk to these people, because when you're seeing something I've said so many dumb things online. That's why I have really stepped back from writing, because I get in a lot of trouble when I try to write something. I'm just not wired that way. And I get frustrated, and then I think about it and it stews, and then I let something out. I've said a lot of dumb things. I look back on it now, I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck was I thinking? A conversation is a little bit different. I mean, I can say some stupid things in a conversation too, but it's a lot easier to relate to somebody in a conversation. And I think there's just so many people that are really trying to do the right thing and trying to figure out what's going on. And there's all these pot shots being taken at each other. And it's not the way to go about this. I think we got to change something here. We got to change something. We need to talk more. And I'm not saying this in like an ecumenical, like, oh, I'm going to go and talk to them and, religious
not dialoguing
type of thing. It's not a dialogue and whatever. I've been a Sedevacanist my whole life. I don't believe that there's any holes in the position, but I don't want to come on and debate with these people. I want to have a conversation. As a priest, I've sat down and I've talked to atheists, and I've talked to agnostics, and I've talked to all different sorts of Protestants. I've talked to people that hated Catholicism. I've talked to Freemasons. I had a guy come up to me one time and say, "Oh, are you Catholic?" And he looked me dead in the eye and said, "I protest." And he like went on a spiel about how he's a Protestant, and I protest all the abuses of the church. And we had a conversation. And you know what we didn't do? What you don't do in a conversation, if you actually care about somebody's soul and want to help them and want to have a good, uplifting conversation, you don't say, "You're wrong, I'm right, you're a heretic." Right. That's not the way I go about it. I can't tell you how many times I sat down with Protestants, through interactions with parishioners or friends or whatever else. And when I come in wearing my collar, they look up and they're like, "Oh man." And they're really awkward and they're really on their guard. And then we start talking, and you chew the fat a little bit and pleasantries and stuff like that. And they relax. And then I've had these, and I'm not just like tooting my own horn here. Whatever. I'm just saying, this isn't what you do in person. You don't just go in like a wrecking ball, just trying to smash people and say, "You're wrong." Mm-hmm. That's what people are doing online. It's not the way to help people. It's not the way to reach people. It's not the way to present a point. And that's what's happening online. And that's why I'm so frustrated with it, because in person, like I said, how many times I've had conversations with Protestants that they're like ready to attack and ready to go on the defense. And then 20 minutes later, they start asking me all sorts of questions because they realize, oh, I can actually talk to this guy. Mm-hmm. He's not being preachy. He's just being a normal human being. Like, I didn't know Catholics were like that. And some of them have converted, not all of them, but some of them. And I think I get so frustrated, and I've been guilty of it too. I'm not saying that I'm like this paragon of virtue and always, no, I want to do better. And I've gone and I've gone to people that are SSPX or Novus Ordo or something like that. And you know what? Not all of some of them are like, they're living in they've gotten an annulment and they don't want to hear about it, or they have some other moral thing that they don't want to give up, and so they don't want to hear about it. So I'm not going to try. If after a certain point they realize they don't want to listen. But you know what I found with a lot of them, they really love God. They really love the Catholic faith. The only reason they are where they are and haven't gone Baptist or some other religion like the Novus Ordo says they could is because they want to be Catholic. They want to be Catholic. Are they in error about things? Yeah. Are they do they want to be Catholic? Do they want to be obedient to their priests? Yeah. What level of goodwill or bad will there is, that's for God to decide. But these are people, these are human beings. And we have to lead by I don't know. I'm my brain's going all over the place here. I'm about to go I'm having a train wreck on this conversation, but I think we need, I don't know, they're people and the online interaction. And I'll sign off here and point this to Eric. I think a lot of the problem comes from the online interactions and how we deal with people so differently when we're online.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than in person. And I think we need to kind of shift a little bit of that mindset.
Yep.
And I want to have more conversations with these people.
Yep. I want to say one of the things you said, Father, was that you've said a lot of stupid things. For the record, the only stupid thing I've ever heard you say was that Ohio is better than Colorado.
I knew that was coming.
Hey, Eric, I got to say that you have some prayers here in the comments.
Yeah. I'm sorry. No, it's one of the downsides.
He's in Colorado. He's in Colorado, so
I'm in Colorado. It's hot here. No.
Yeah. It's closer to purgatory. Unlike Father,
I have a wife to answer to, and she won't let me smoke in the house. So, hence I'm in the garage. Hence the lighting is bad. My apologies. Anyway, and the other thing. So, Father, I have friends and actually a lot of extended family who are in the, I guess you could say R&R, but really, like the fraternity, the traditional Catholics that still follow the Vatican and the Pope. And I sort of understand where they're coming from the perspective that the Catholic instinct is to defend the Pope and align with the Pope, right?
Right.
I think a lot of what we as Sedes and some of us as Cradle Sedes miss in our Catholicism is that instinctual defense of the Pope, right? We can do it for the true popes. But it makes me worry what happens when we do, God willing, get a true Pope, how many of us will actually follow, right? Some of us may be used to being on our own, but making that jump, right? From being Catholic, I want to be Catholic, making the jump from R&R Catholic to Sede Vacantist, that takes a grace from God. Right. That's not something like, yes, you can come to it intellectually looking at the heresies that the Pope, the false popes have promoted. But even making that jump, it takes a gift from God. And it's certainly not something that trolls yelling at you online is going to help with.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's been a single conversion to the true faith, the Sede Vacantist faith, because someone read a bunch of YouTube comments and said, oh, that's got to be right.
Actually, I would say
people, yes.
I would say there have been. However,
Wow.
the problem, I saw a wave of this a number of years ago, where you had teenagers, young adults who, and God bless them for being brilliant. They started out basically as atheists, and they went the whole range. They went from atheism to Christianity, explored Protestant, came to Catholicism, said, no, this can't be right. And then they went through the progression of SSSP, SSPX, and they went through in a very short amount of time, and it was all intellectual. The problem with it is they did not appreciate what they were up against in terms of living the faith. And so I remember one young man who even tried the seminary and was on fire. I mean, he was on fire. He says, I'm going to be the bishop. I'm going to be the Pope. I'm going to fix this whole thing. But he didn't realize that when he got in the seminary, he couldn't listen to acid rock music. And when he found that out, he was gone. He went off onto something else. And so to the extent that some of these kids do, convert based on what they're reading online or what they're seeing in the comments of YouTube or X, it's not worth a whole bunch. There's no roots there.
Yeah, but we're talking about Anthony and how much I think all three of us would love him to, become a sedevacantist, not because we want to be right or prove that we're right, but because we want him to have the truth, the true faith, and the true mass and sacraments, right? That isn't most people. Some people, you gave the exception. Most people are not going to be attracted by online vitriol and gotcha questions.
Yeah.
There's a subset of people that are, but most are not.
Most are not. Yeah, I was in that world for. And I got to tell a quick story about when I first got involved in the whole thing. I was I don't know, it was kind of neocon site that was called Free Republic, and was kind of pitching. And I didn't know much. I mean, I was new, and I was in that first generation where basically the first generation of pioneers lost their children, and there weren't a lot of us, and there's nobody online. I was new to the faith. I didn't know it very well, but I was gung-ho and wanting to preach, and I was out there, and I thought I could literally scandalize people into the true faith. That's what I thought. And so I remember I was on there at the time when John Paul II kissed the Quran and started showing pictures, and it's like, I thought I could stand outside of a church and just start signing people in because, hey, John Paul II kissed the Quran. I'm out of here and I'm going to be Sede now. Well, it didn't work that way. You didn't scandalize anybody into the faith.
Yeah, same thing with the Pachamama, right? Or Pachamama.
Right.
Say that.
Yeah, we thought that might do it, and it just didn't have much impact.
Well, and that's the foundational issue is the papacy. I mean, that's the whole problem here is the papacy. And, trying to uphold the papacy whilst pointing out that this guy isn't the Pope and can't be the Pope. It's like, I mean, I still wanted to jump on the show Rob and Anthony were doing the other day. I've just recently started following. I'm very new to this whole listening to different trad guys. Like, I've been preserved from all of this my whole life. Like, I didn't know an SSPX person till I was a priest. Like, I was very new to all of this stuff. Only been to the CMRI my whole life. But something. Rob was on his show. They were commenting on some cardinal or some Novus Ordo bishop, whatever. And Rob was like, this guy isn't a Catholic. He's a Marxist. I was like, wow. Okay, hold on. You're saying he's not a Catholic. You're saying he's a Marxist. Can we use that same logic to say these guys aren't Catholics? They're modernists. So they're not part of the church. They're not representatives of the church. It's just a very simple, I mean, the logic is there, but I think so many of these guys, they have these priests and these bishops that they respect a lot that are pretty traditional or very traditional, or their priests at their church that they go to is really traditional, and they quote Thomas Aquinas and all these other saints and stuff. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misrepresentations and a lot of other things. I can't speak to their soul. That's between God, but I get frustrated because it's like I want these people to have the clarity that we have. Not because I'm so smart and all this. I'm a moron. But the clarity that comes from like, this is a break, and that isn't the church, and the true church is still alive. It's there, but everything after the Vatican II, that's a different religion. That's a different church, and the true church is in the underground. It's coming out. It's getting lighter and brighter, and it's shining more. But I'm just so sad for these guys that I think I don't want to call anybody like that's trying to sort this stuff out a heretic and be like, just bash them and you're not worth my time and you're the enemy and you're the problem and you're the worst. I don't. If I was raised that way, I'd be having the same problems. I think I don't know. Again, I'm getting my brain is derailing again as usual. I can't hold two thoughts.
That's why we're here, Father.
It's sorry.
I think
lost
if more
pathetic.
Sedes, if more Sedes understood that their understanding, their ability to come to the truth was a gift of God, it was a grace, not
Right.
their own intellect or their own
that they cooperated with, yes, of course.
Yes,
right.
absolutely right. And you have to be
And a lot of
intellectually
them,
honest about it.
and hey, I'm sorry. I
No,
say
no,
I have
but
nothing else to say, and then I interrupt you. Sorry.
No, but I think that's maybe not the root cause, but one of the root causes is the going at it from a place of I figured it out, now you have to figure it out, as opposed to I've been given this grace, now I want God to give you this grace. We should do a lot more
Yeah.
praying and a lot less arguing, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and be worried about ruining God's plan. I mean, obviously we're not going to ruin God's plan in that sense, but like if we're not careful, we can crush that delicate grace or that delicate will.
Mhm.
What in a time like we try to step beyond our proper bound.
And
Right.
we'll answer for
and-
that if we do crush that.
We
crush that
will,
grace.
right.
Yep.
Or
Well,
yeah, and maybe
and I
set
think one
back
of the
their
things
conversion.
one of the things I learned, and I was on for 2 or 3 different stints and on for a lot of years, and you made every mistake there was to make, and I mean I was at times the exact person that I'm calling out tonight. So it's not like I'm saying pointing the finger at you, because I'm pointing the finger at me as well. But one of the things I think I learned over time is one of the things what you try to do early on in a conversation is you look for goodwill. Is there goodwill there? And I think we can see it. I know, with Anthony and Rob avoiding bad. I mean, in my mind, there's no question. There's goodwill there. Stephen Cox, who we've had on our show, who is his not. I think he holds the set of conscious position. He doesn't like the title, doesn't want the label applied to him, but he basically holds the position. Chris Jackson, another one on X, who's a big name out there, and these are guys who are they're of good will. All you have to do is go back and forth with them a couple times, and you find out. And I won't call out specifically by names on the ones who are of bad will, but once you find out that they're of bad will, just leave them. Don't stay there and bash. Don't get mad. Don't let it affect your spiritual peace. Just block them or mute them and move on. Take the people who are of goodwill and try to bring them to the faith 1 inch at a time. I always try to think of myself as basically looking at somebody as being a super, a ship, like ship at sea. And if we're going to get them to move to Sedative consciousness, to wherever, we got to get them moved this far. Well, you're not going to move them this far in one go. Maybe what you do is you try to move the bow of the ship just ever so much. And for me, it was always, especially if I got into any kind of extended discussion with anybody, it was just essential for me. Leave them with a happy thought. Give them a compliment on how hard they, how much they stuck to it. Give them a compliment. Leave them with good feelings, and they'll come back. And I think that's one of the things that really gets me is that people get upset and they chew somebody else out, and they say something disrespectful or something uncharitable, and that person's not only going to leave you, they're going to leave your position, and they're not going to come back. They're not going to think about it, and you may have lost them.
You can always encourage them to pray. Just be like, okay, you
Right.
don't want to talk about it, don't want to discuss it, you're not listening. Hey, just pray the rosary. Make sure you pray the rosary, and just encourage them along that line. I think that's important. That's something Sister Claricia would always say. She's been a nun for a very long time, before Vatican II, and she'd always say, talking about Protestants that you meet and come across, just remind them to pray. If they don't pray, they're never going to have the grace that they need, ever. But I had the thought earlier today that, like, we have to be careful that we're not like the libs, the crazy blue-haired libs, that when you say abortion is a murder, they say, why do you hate women?
Yeah.
It's kind of like this emotional response that just is like, where are you coming from? I think there's some people, I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody in particular I can think of, but sometimes I see that, it's just like this unhinged emotional reaction to it that is like, where is this coming from?
Well, and I'll tell you where I think the connection comes in here is that with the left, they have what you would call a purity test. So basically, if you're not pure enough for them, if you say something nice about Donald Trump, you're out. You're excommunicated. You're gone. Okay. Well, it's something I've seen in our movement that we have an inclination to do that as well. That we set up purity tests. Hey, you're coming into church and you may be the first time here, and you're a woman and you're wearing pants because you didn't know that you had to wear a dress, and you failed the purity test, you're gone.
I've seen that with converts and tattoos as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, you can't be a Catholic if you have tattoos.
Right.
What? Yeah, it's a purity thing, and you're right. Absolutely.
Well, that
right.
rules out a third of my parish. No.
Oh, no Arkansas jokes here.
No Arkansas jokes. Hey, good people. No, I don't know. I always say, and this applies to Protestants as well. This applies to Protestants and others. We're Sedevacantists. Oh, you're not Catholics? I've gotten that before.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Even after I've sat down and talked to people for 3-4 hours, they're like, I had to, this person says, and I was telling somebody that we're not Catholics. We're not Roman Catholics. We're Sedevacantist Catholics. It's like, I'm completely open about the fact that I'm a Sedevacantist, unashamedly, but I'm a Catholic. And names, we have to make distinctions and stuff, but Sedevacantist is like, okay, it's a theological position, yes, but we're Catholic. That's what we want to be.
It's a
We
theological
just
position.
be Catholic.
Yes, it's a theological position that allows us to be true Catholics.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's
well,
really. I don't even
unchanged.
like the Sedevacantist. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the difficulty, I think, is that the modernists had done a good job of just poisoning the word, and then you got these very superficial arguments instead of constant societies or Protestants or whatever it is, and they poison it. And so what happens? You come into a conversation as a Sedevacantist and somebody who Novus Ordo, and they may be new to the conversation or what, they expect you to be a jerk, and they expect you to be condescending and all that kind of stuff. And the best way to win them as converts is not to be any of that, and to be gracious, and perhaps you don't even start by understanding who they are, what makes them tick. Let's not look at Pashindi Greggies, and start looking at Pope St. Pius X and just start hitting them over the head with it. I mean, get to know people, and I think maybe that's breaking down the stigma, the online problem, where we can have these better conversations with people in person, but not in maybe try to think of yourself as being in person with this person and reading body language and all that kind of stuff first.
Oh, yeah.
Before you get into theology.
Man, I can't tell you how many times like I've had visitors, come on a Sunday that were from the Novus Order or something, like, oh man, it was so nice to see the Latin Mass, and they start asking questions, and then and this is why I think like in-person conversations, or at least on a video chat or something, you can watch the body language. Like if you say I've had it happen so many times where I've pushed too far or I wasn't prudent in how I approached it, and you just see their eyes just kind of fade out, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, that was nice, and then they walk off, and I'm like, dang it. I wasn't careful. I wasn't
like pulling the fishing rod up before the hook is in, right?
And that's the analogy I always use. It's like, you want to try to get people to ask questions. Like if they're, say a little bit that gets them interested, and leave it. If they're not ready for it, or if God's grace isn't working there, and this is Protestants or whatever, wait for the response, because you can really easily scare the fish away. If you start pounding the water or shooting with a shotgun trying to get the fish, it's not so good. But there was a quote from Saint Dominic. I should have put it up on here, but he said, heretics are to be converted by an example of humility and other virtues far more readily than by any external display or verbal battles. So let us arm ourselves with devout prayers and set off showing signs of genuine humility and go barefooted. Go barefooted to combat Goliath. Really nice quote. And you know, I think everybody has different talents and different roles too. My role as a priest is different from a layperson's role. And even as my role as a priest, before doing this kind of thing online, I've asked permission from my bishop. Is it okay if I do these things online? Like, I want to make sure that I have, that I'm getting some blessing from him, or that, if it's not God's will for me to be like trying to be more online and more visible and stuff, I want to make sure that I'm not going overstepping my bounds, or that it's not something that God is going to be pleased with. And so I want that extra, a blessing, or virtue of obedience, or whatever else, because I want to be careful. Even as a priest, I'm definitely, as you know, not the most well spoken, but I want to be careful that I don't even overstep my role as a priest in these very difficult times, and not have God's blessing on it. So, like, even just recently, I was like, before I reached out, or reached out about, hey, Anthony, can we have a conversation? I ran it by my bishop, because I want to not overstep what I'm supposed to do. Or if the bishop doesn't think that I'm a good person for that role, then I want him to tell me that, and I'll definitely listen. And and that's as a priest, I have a little bit more of the role of preaching than does your layperson.
A little more authority, yeah.
Right.
But the public representation is really, it's a kind of a scary thing, and there's a lot of responsibility, a burden of responsibility that goes with that, and I think we want to be mindful of that for sure.
Yeah. Let me make a quick programming note here. In addition to being the lead ranter today, I'm also kind of on comments. And as I've been talking, I really have not been paying good attention to. I've noticed that there's some really good questions out there, and I think maybe we can move into a little bit of question and answer. Just as I say, if you asked a question earlier and I didn't catch it, if you don't mind, and there's a lot of comments. If you don't mind just asking again. Well, I think we'll put some of these to Father. I'm going to put up one first from Commodus, who is asking Father. This is a nuanced question. Isn't it sacrilege to give communion to a Novus Ordo?
Well, I know there's different policies in different churches. I know the SSPV, for example, they will not give communion to someone unless they know them, or for sure. But if you have somebody, I think there's more harm than good that's done to souls. If you have somebody visiting, you don't know if they're you don't know if they could be SSPX, or they could be totally new. But if you're not sure, you presume that they're Catholic. That's why they're there. And then you try to have the conversation with them afterwards, or when it's the right time, or whatever else. But that's what our policy is. It's like but that's it. It's, I don't know. I would respond also. I would respond also that when they come into sedevacantist position and whatever else, they don't take an abjuration of error. So just dismissing them as heretics or whatever is like, okay, well, if that's the case, no sedevacantist groups have them take, as far as I know, an abjuration of error as you would with a Protestant. They don't do that. Why? Because they're not formally heretics, at least in most instances. Now, if you had a Father Martin or somebody like that, oh, you betcha he would be taking an abjuration error. If you have these people that are preaching and promoting the so blatantly religious indifferentism and all that other stuff, oh, maybe we can make a case for that. But as far as your usual run-of-the-mill Novus Ordo Catholic, are they Catholic? Well, we don't have them taking abjuration of error. So there's all these different gray areas and stuff like that, and all these different technicalities and stuff. But
yeah. If only we had a pope to sort that out for us.
Yeah,
that'd be
right.
really nice,
Wouldn't that be nice? But I'm just talking a little bit higher level, I think that I was told by a good priest friend of ours that it is a mortal sin for a priest to deny communion without ample reason. And
Right.
so, in my mind, at least, that says if you're in doubt, give them communion. In
Right.
all the years I have been in Bishop Pirvarunas's parish in Omaha, I've only seen him deny communion one time, and that was to a husband of a guy who's just not totally there, and he only comes a couple times a year. He's just not all there. And so he approached the communion rail for communion, and the bishop. This was just beautiful because I was almost right behind him in line. The bishop gave him, gave him a blessing on his forehead, and leaned over and whispered and just said, "Come see me after mass." And and to the extent that he could take care of it, and they could get him on the right track, then they probably did. But I know it's the policy, as far as I know it, that don't deny communion unless if it's James Martin or it's somebody who's making a mockery of the sacraments. Yeah, then you have to do it. But by and large, that's just not, it's not a good practice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if somebody comes up and they're they're a Protestant, you're not giving them communion,
Right.
obviously. But there's just so much gray area in this time with dealing with them. Is the lines of, well, they're only following this because they believe that's what the Catholic Church teaches. Material heresy, sure. Formal heresy, there's a lot of gray area. Cinderella. Is Saint King Louis Sedevacantist group priest valid? I don't know who they are. I've never heard of them.
I don't know who they are. Yeah, same thing.
So no clue. I don't have an answer for you there. Where's Father Applehands when you need him?
That's right. He'd be our one. Well, and I know there's a Redemptorist group that in Europe, I think in Scotland or England, that just recently basically broke from Rome, and they're making a lot of news right now. And I think that they, as far as I know, they're I don't know if they're necessarily valid, but they're
the
definitely on
ordinations
the right.
would be the question there, right?
Yeah, and they. So let me go ahead and Julia Rose asks a question. Have you ever heard of Bishop Raphael Cloakwell, who was consecrated on this day in 1996? He was consecrated by Bishop Orvik, or Peter was consecrated by Bishop Carmona. Okay, I don't know either of those names, but what I would say is that Bishop Orvik was definitely a valid bishop. He was consecrated by, I think that there was issues with him later in his life. We actually, on Catholic Family Podcast, we posted a video of Bishop Orvik. He didn't do an interview when he was here in Omaha a lot of years ago, talking about his story from being from Eastern Europe. And one of the nuns said, I don't know if I'd asked you to take it down, but he kind of fell a bit in his later days. So you got to be careful with Bishop Orvik. But I have to believe that he was validly consecrated by Bishop Robert McKenna. And so I think anybody he consecrated probably would, you have to assume, would be valid as well. And then Bishop Peter Hillebrand is another one I've never heard of, but if he was consecrated by Bishop Carmona, there's no question he's valid.
Yeah, valid, but I don't know. I don't know a lot of history of the different independent
different groups. Yeah,
or whatever. Yeah, I'm not too read up on that.
Yeah. But you're right. I think that we'll have to see if we can get Father Applehands onto a show just to ask these types of questions. He is an amazing resource. I mean, he's studied all of this, and in fact, I remember using him once. We got approached a couple of years ago, right after we put the Indefectible series out by a group that's Sacred Heart Church in Boston. And it's like, they presented themselves as being Orthodox and Catholic and all that. I didn't know who they were. And so I went to Father Applehands and asked, and Father, they're totally good. They're friends with Father McKenna at SGG in Cincinnati, and they were totally legitimate. So I mean, we've kind of worked with them a little bit over the last year or two.
Yeah, our last priest meeting. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Father. Oh, I was just going to quick comment, Father Applehands. Not only is he well read, but I think he has a photographic memory too, so that doesn't hurt.
and tells the worst dad jokes ever. No, his no puns, I should say, not dad jokes. His puns are legendary, infamous, I should say. No, at our last priest meeting, he actually had done all this research, and he had like I don't know how many pages and pages of different all the clergy he's done research on and where they come from in their line, and where there's doubtful this that. It was kind of like the Traditio, online Traditio, where they have all the different things listed, but it was for clergy. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Another good question here. We all know that heaven will produce a true pope. Is there any Catholic prophecy that tells us when that will be? I don't know that it's 100% necessary that we'll have another true pope. I for me, the preponderance of evidence says that we will. We'll have a restoration in the church before the end of time, but I think we're living in such unique times. I don't think there is any Catholic prophecy that gives us any idea of when, how long this is going to go on, whether it's another 5 years. I can tell you just a couple of key numbers. You've got in 2028, I think it is, that's going to be 70 years since the death of Pope Pius XII, and that's kind of a biblically significant number, I suppose. I'm not saying it's going to end in 2028 or anything, but no, basically from prophecy, bottom line is we just don't really know.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any prophecies with regard to that. I'm not the most read on such things, but I'm sure you could find a prophecy that was found online a year ago that actually dates back 6,000 years to St. Thomas Aquinas, who said that, there's going to be, no, just kidding.
Right.
You can find anything online, but I don't know of any legit prophecies with regard to that for sure. Yeah.
What would it take to...
Sorry.
Yeah, this one, this is an outstanding question, and believe it or not, I'm going to give you a better answer than you probably are expecting, Cinderella. So, yes, it definitely, Bishop Ivarunas gets these kind of requests all the time, and what I would say, just as somebody who's kind of watched these missions grow and develop, is that what you need to have, number one, just before you even approach anything, if you have a place to offer mass and you have the means of being able to support a priest's travel, and you have a small congregation, you need to have more than just 2 or 3 people to justify a priest coming and traveling to West Virginia. But if you have a community like that, then what I would say is reach out to it's cmri.org. There is a feedback page there, a request page, just a contact us type of a page. And I think that I don't know if the priest would want me to say who he is, so I won't say who he is, but there is a priest that monitors those and he's very responsive, and he takes those requests, and if possible, he'll forward them on to the bishop, or he'll look at a nearby priest or whatever. But I have seen literally that happen, and people coming and putting in a request, and within a year or two they've got a mass. I mean, Father can probably even tell the story of how Arkansas came to be.
Yeah, no.
And when you're done, I've got a couple examples too.
Yeah,
positive ones. Yeah,
my first mass in Arkansas was with like 5 people, and that's what I'd say for you there is like reach out. I think Father Gregory Draymond is in Ohio there, right next to you. He will go anywhere and ever. Bishop Ivarunas put it in a retreat talk one time that Father Gregory will do the impossible for the ungrateful for nothing. Like sums up Father Gregory. So it's like Sunday masses were limited. We can only go so far, do so much. But sometimes during the week, like, I'll have mass, like for myself, I'll drive 5 hours, to Kentucky and have a mass for people there in Paducah. And then another day I'll drive 4 hours to near St. Louis, south, about an hour south of hour and a half south of St. Louis, have mass for a few people there. So, even if you don't have a huge congregation, if you need the mass and sacraments, the priests are willing to help you out. So,
yeah, and it's beautiful. So like the Mass Center the CMR has in Denver, Our Lady of the Snows, I believe it started with 23, maybe 26 people, something like that, requested Bishop Ivarunas, and he provided, not a permanent priest right away, but a Mass Center. And now I think
And there was
Denver's
already a couple of masses in Denver at that
exactly
time.
other
So,
groups. And
yeah,
I think now it's the third biggest parish in the CMRI.
I think it's the third
there's
biggest. Yeah,
over
Minnesota,
450,
Phoenix,
500 people. Yeah.
Spokane, Minnesota, Phoenix, and Denver. And I'm not sure exactly what the order is.
Yeah. So, only, is granted it was 15 or whatever years ago, but still, that's how quickly we can grow. And then another example is our priest here in Colorado Springs had a mission out in Albuquerque, right? A state down. I think it's like 5-6 hour drive for, I think there were 3 or 4 people. And now in the last, year or two, it's grown to, I think he has over 60, 70 now.
Wow.
Due to, a Pius X church sort of going under. So, we start small, but
Right.
anything we can start grows.
Well, and you never know. Some of these missions, they say the same number, 7 people, 10 people for years and years and years and years, and others they just explode. You never know. You can't plan those things, but the priests still want to make sure that you get the mass and sacraments. I mean, obviously, like, do what you can. If you're an hour away from a church, travel. Like, the priest can't be traveling, to everywhere. If you can, reasonably make the drive and make it to mass, even if it's only like once a month or something like that. But there was a question again about the French monarch. With
Yeah, I was
Cinderella.
just going to put that up there.
I talked about that a little bit in length with a podcast with Kevin, where we were talking about the Crusades and stuff that came up. It is not true. It's completely bogus. One of our priests did a lot of research on that, and he showed me all the sorts and stuff. It's not a true prophecy. It's never had any proof from the church. It's no good. Father Laterno's in Boston.
Yeah.
So yeah, they actually have, I think, 2 CMRI sisters there as well that just kind of do apostolic work there. They don't have a school, but they do all kinds of stuff there. So yeah, there's a few in the East Coast in Boston.
Yep. Wheelersburg, Ohio. I think the Wheelersburg. One time it was. Who is that in Wheelersburg? It was
Father Lee.
Father
Lee.
Father Lee. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, I was there. I served for the dedication of that church. I don't know what year
wow.
it was. Probably like 04, 05, something like that. But I was a wee lad.
Here's an interesting question from Portagusi. There's a prophecy that says St. Peter and St. Paul will come down and point out the true pope, but I'm uncertain of the validity of that prophecy. I'm the same way. I don't think of it as an impossibility. I like to say I actually subscribe to the old Father Geckle had 4 different ways that the sedevacantist scenario resolves itself. One is with the conversion of a true pope. That's a discussion for another day. That's kind of the thesis, and that's one that would be a lengthy discussion. But 2 is an imperfect council where basically your sedevacantist bishops got together and elected a pope, which I think it would not be legal. It would be moral. Completely impractical today. I mean, just completely impractical.
Right now, yeah.
3 is the end of time that we don't get a restoration, and number 4 is just basically other known only to God. And typically when you talk about that other option, it's just something to great chastisement. We don't really know. There is that one that talks about St. Peter and Paul coming down to point out the truth. I honestly don't know. It's one that I have seen a number of times, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I have never heard of anybody testing the veracity of it, whether it's true or not.
I've only heard that from Home Aloners, wherever they get their information from. That's the only place I've ever heard that from.
From home, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sister Bernadette and Sister Casimira in Boston. That's right. Sister Casimira was in Maine for a long time, but I think she's in Boston now. So, okay, so we are up on an hour and a half. I think we're wearing out. Didn't that go fast? Holy cow!
Maybe not for the listeners. I don't know. For us, it
yeah, that was this was a little bit painful. It's like, oh my goodness, guys, are you still at it? But yeah, Father Gabriel to dig into. That would be good. The St. Peter and Paul prophecy, but yeah, I think if we've got any final questions, and I don't know if you want to do a last little roundtable discussion, guys, to kind of bring this whole topic home for tonight. Maybe let's leave on a good note. And I know Kevin doesn't like everything to devolve to Catholic action, but I think we've talked about plenty of bad stuff tonight. Let's talk about what we can do positively going forward. Do you want to start?
I'll go first because I don't have much deep to talk about, but I would recommend, if you really want to experience true Catholicism, travel around as much as you can to different parishes in the United States, or even in Europe. Go to different CMRI parishes, go to even different under Bishop Sanborn or Bishop McGuire, and just talk to the people and explain where you're from, where you come from, what your life looks like. Talk to them about their kids and their homeschooling, and it's very edifying to me. And I hope some of the keyboard warriors out there maybe give that a shot and then see the world in a different light.
Absolutely.
Good.
Father?
Very good. Molly, I think Eric is suffering from Colorado poisoning. He's in Colorado and it's affecting him.
The air is so fresh.
Well,
my skin is vigorous. Yeah.
Your sister's worried there for you there, Eric.
Yeah, right.
It's the garage lighting, okay? Come on.
Yeah. That's funny. That word assume, you know how you deconstruct that, what happens when you make assumptions. It makes a what out of you and me. I think that's kind of the word assume, makes a donkey out of you and me. We'll be careful how I say that because children might be listening. I've made a lot of dumb assumptions in my life, and because I've been very sheltered in the sedevacantist world, I've made a lot of assumptions that were very wrong, and assumptions about where people were or where different groups were or whatever else amongst sedevacantists, as well as amongst different other groups that are, misled, whatever. And I'm done doing that, and I don't want to do it anymore. And I don't want to, I don't want to be a hypocrite, but I really don't want to do that. And I want to have, like I said, I want to. I'm so sick of politics, and I'm sick of infighting, and I'm sick of good people that are really trying, attacking each other, and I'm sick of assuming people's where they are, goodwill or bad will or this or heretic or whatever. This is the most confusing time in the church, and there's a lot of people that are misled and confused. And I don't know if there's any people from the R&R or whatever, any trad groups out there, I would like to have a conversation. I believe that there's some serious errors there, and I'd like to have a conversation with these people, because how are we going to change anything if we don't talk about it and we just make assumptions about each other? There's a lot of people that make assumptions about us. There's a lot of us that makes assumptions about them. That's got to change. We've got to change that. I'm sick of it, and it's not helping people get closer to God. When Charlie Kirk got shot, we'll bring this up again. My reaction to that, my first reactions, it very much echoed what Father Zepeda did in his talk, his video that he put up, and unfortunately took down. I'm trying to convince him to put it back up. I felt like a loser because somebody like Charlie Kirk, who's a Protestant and was misled on so many things, and whether I think he was of goodwill, wherever he ended up, by the grace of God, I hope he saved his soul and whatever else. But he was out there doing these kids' minds that were blue-haired liberal lunatics, and how many millions has he affected? And I'm no Charlie Kirk. I don't read 100 books a year like he did. I don't have his talents and his gifts or whatever. But I want to sit down and talk with people. I want to reach out to people. I want to help people have some clarity or whatever, build some bridges. We're not going to take back the Vatican. We're not going to bring back bring clarity into this world and bring Catholics back to the true faith and true understanding of the papacy. We're not going to do that without conversations. I really want to have more conversations with these people. When I do it in person, it's great. Like I said, whether it's an atheist, what do we agree with an atheist? But I can sit down and have a conversation with them. Does it always get somewhere? No, but at least there's some good that comes out of it. There's some mutual understanding that might lead to a conversion later on. And like I said, I asked the bishop permission. Is this something that I can do? And he said yes. So I'm pretty motivated by that, because I want to have conversations with these people. We've got the bishop's okay to do it. So if anybody is listening that is willing to sit down with a crazy schismatic sedevacantist who's just like Martin Luther, that's what they say. I'd like to have a conversation.
Very good.
Let's see what.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what I would say to close out here, and I'm going to pick on a comment here. Portuguese says, looked like a lot of good bit of finger pointing in the chat above earlier. Glad I missed out. Now, I was ranting, and so I was not reading the comments, but probably a good bit of the finger pointing was coming from me. So I'm not going to blame anybody who was pointing fingers back in the comments. But what I would say is, if you feel like you have the need to get out there into the public sphere, Facebook's not so bad, because you can tailor your friends, and it's a little bit more friendly environment. But you get into the mosh pits like X, and I don't know about Instagram, some of those, and you feel like you're called to go out there. Guys, get to know people. Pray for their parents when they're sick, okay? Tell them about, if they're having a rough day, tell them you're praying for them, okay? Before you even go into and try to get to know people and engage them personally, because, that's, I think, we've been one of the themes tonight, is that to the extent that we talk to people face to face, it's a entirely different experience than what it is online. Well, let's do what we can, practically speaking, to make that online experience a little bit more like real life, and work with put body language, emojis. I tend to be an emoji type of a guy, and that's not super, I don't know, maybe some people don't think it's super masculine or whatever, but soften your language, feel their pain, have empathy for people, be charitable, be humble. And that's, I think, how we win this is not through just sheer force of will and trying to get our thoughts out there and winning the intellectual warfare. That's not how we do it. We end up, like the picture here shows, and we end up at the Circular Firing Squad. So, let's make sure we work in charity and in true humility. So, guys, with that, I think we'll call it a night. And Eric, Father, I really appreciate you guys coming on. And I told Kevin, watch out, man. I'm on edge tonight. I may be going off the rails, and it's been kind of one of those weeks. But no, I appreciate it. And again, everybody in the comments, we had good number, good number of people, and a lot of good and I apologize that I was talking so much. I missed a lot of the chat. So I'll have to maybe go back and see if I can reread it. But everybody, this is great. We'll try to do it again, and maybe have another topic that we are just completely fired up for. So thanks, everybody, and God bless, and we will see you.